All right. Good evening, everybody. How's it going? I am Ian Douglas. I am the author of TechInterview.guide, and I'm going to go over this screen. And with us tonight, we've got Katherine Lewis from LinkedIn. Hello, Katherine. How's it going?
Hey, Ian, I'm doing great. Thanks for having me.
Well, thanks for being on the stream. Appreciate your time. So, Katherine was a student at the Turing School of Software and Design and now works at LinkedIn. So, we're going to talk to Katherine about kind of her perspectives and thoughts on what should go into a LinkedIn profile. What's important, what's less important, you know, things to keep in mind, how to look at community links and networking, stuff like that. So super excited to have you. Thanks for giving us some of your time tonight. Um, cool. Let's dive in. Why don't you start with a little bit of your background? Like, how did you get into development? How did that end up at Turing? And then how did you get the job at LinkedIn in the first place?
Yeah, happy to share. So I'll start my journey just before Turing. So I studied business and then decided to become an elementary school teacher. And so I was teaching second and third grade. And while I loved working with the students, I also came to a point where I was ready for a change. And while I was teaching, I happened to do a program called Code with Classy. And the whole premise of the program is to teach high school girls how to code. So not only was I teaching them, but I first had to teach myself how to program, which was a very interesting experience, to say the least. But Turing actually helped out with that. So they were a collaborator, and I believe currently still are, with Code with Classy. And they performed a weekend workshop for us and taught us the fundamentals of HTML and CSS and GitHub. And so after doing a couple of different summer camps, I decided to transition out from teaching. Now, with a background in business, I was thinking of going down the business route, decided that I wanted to switch to engineering instead. So I started in January of 2019 as a front end engineer in the Turing Bootcamp, and then went through the program and did all four mods and actually repeated mod 3. So it took me a little bit longer, but I got done in September 2019. So almost coming up on 2 years out of the program here. Yeah, and so then while I was interning, I went through the whole front end program and got started with the job search early. So starting in Mod 2, I started doing mock interviews, working with different mentors, applying to positions, joining meetup groups, all kinds of things, and eventually got a position with LinkedIn as a UX engineer.
Great. Awesome. A little bit curious, what was the interview process like at LinkedIn? Like, can you talk
Yeah.
about that a little bit? Like, what sorts of things did you have to study? What was important for them as part of the interview process and so on?
Yeah, so I can touch at a high level what that process
Sure.
was like. But basically, I was contacted by a recruiter. We had an initial conversation just about the position and what it would be like working at LinkedIn. And after expressing interest, then they invited me for an on site interview. So I had an all day interview process. I had a code challenge that I had to complete, and coming in as a UX engineer, the code challenge was oriented around whatever language you wanted to pick. So I chose JavaScript and React and built out an application. And then that was something that we had to walk the interviewers through and explain the whole process, our thought process for creating this application. And to my knowledge, what was really being highlighted is, do you have technical skills, first of all? But also, if you don't, are you able to problem solve and think about how might you solve this problem or this piece of code that you've never written before? And can you collaborate with others in order to get through that process? So that was the technical aspect. And then there was also the cultural fit interview, where we are talking about those basic questions. Tell me about yourself. Tell me about a challenging time, the ones that you would expect. But really, I tried to approach it from as much of an emotionally intelligent perspective as I could, saying, I recognize this time when I failed. I made a mistake here, and this led me to understand X, Y, and Z strength or weakness about myself and really be vulnerable in the process. And so once that full day interview was complete, then I was given an offer.
That's great. That's cool. I like how you brought kind of the emotional equity or the EQ side of it into things. I recall even while you were at Turing that you had a pretty strong interest in like accessibility and uh, user experience and things like that. So it's pretty cool that you put a lot more emphasis on that as part of your interview process. So that's pretty cool. Did they have any sorts of feedback or anything like that around like that part of your project work or anything like that as part of your interview process?
Yeah, it was actually really interesting and completely unexpected. But as I mentioned, we had to walk them through this application that we had built. And so I'm going and explaining, line by line, this is what I did, this is why I did it, this connects to this other thing over here, this is what the user experience would be. And by the end, I was totally winded because I had just been talking on. And I thought, oh geez, like, what did I do? What did I say wrong? And then the first interviewer says, that was the best explanation I have ever had.
That's great.
And I was just, yeah, I was totally dumbfounded. And I think that comes from my background in teaching of being able to break things down on a very simple level and say, this is what's happening. And these are the different elements that come together to build this complex system, but really taking it down to that simple level. And they appreciated it.
That's great. Cool. For everybody on the stream, just FYI, there's a hey, Cursive Hole 6, thank you for following. Appreciate that. Just as an FYI, there is a bit of a glitch in the software of the website that Catherine and I are using to sort of communicate. And so sometimes her video may glitch out a little bit. I'll refresh it on my side, but it will cut out her audio for a second or so while I do that. So just bear with us. I'll wait for like a pause in the conversation and then I'll like refresh just so I don't interrupt Catherine as she's going through kind of her talk about LinkedIn. So cool. So it sounds like you had a pretty fantastic interview experience. It's always good to be able to draw from those experience sides of things and bring that in. And it sounds like for them that was actually really helpful and really meaningful to kind of get to know you as a person, not just as a developer, and like what kinds of things are super important for you. So that's pretty cool. How much was your LinkedIn profile a part of them evaluating you? Like, what did your LinkedIn profile look like at the time? And what sorts of things do you think they were looking for when you were applying for a job there?
Yeah, it's funny. I actually applied for that position through LinkedIn. And so I used the website to apply, and I used my profile as part of my resume. So I had the option to attach my resume, and then you also have the easy apply option within LinkedIn. So it sent my entire profile directly to them. I don't know specifically what they looked at, but what I do know is for me at the time, I made sure to include all of my education, all of my experience. I loved putting all the details on my profile, kind of like building out my professional story, and just all of the achievements were on there, right? And so it probably was overwhelming actually to look at. It's too much information, but we'll get into all the details later of how to do it better than I did at the time. But I think they saw that experience with Turing and with Code with Classy and said, even though this person is coming from a different industry and transferring in, she still has that in between experience going through that boot camp. And just to clarify, I was coming in as part of their apprenticeship program, so they knew that I didn't have a background in computer science, and we're looking specifically for that boot camp to be on the profile.
Yeah, that's great. It's really great to find companies who are willing to kind of look past that CS requirement anymore. I just had kind of a bit of a debate on LinkedIn in a discussion with some other folks over the past week or two about like, have you ever worked at a company that required a CS degree? And I said, yeah, I worked under like a VP of engineering who made it mandatory no matter what role you had in the engineering team, whether you're doing front end development or QA work, you had to have a CS degree. And how I kind of argued with them about it at the time, and they're like, nope, that's my requirement, they must have. It's like, wow. They don't need it. Like, for a lot of what we do here, like for a lot of what they're going to be working on, it really doesn't require a 4-year degree. But they had, I think I don't think they had a PhD, but I think they had a master's degree in computer science. And so for them, that was just kind of like, well, that was my background. And if you're going to work for me, you need the same background sort of mentality. And I don't know if that was strictly the case or if they really did have something else in mind, like they wanted like high optimization kind of thing. But it's always disappointing when you find companies that are like really strict about that kind of stuff. So I really appreciate when companies take a minute to think about like, no, we really don't have to have, it's nice to have, but you don't have to have, certain aspects of a profile of what they're really looking for in an applicant. So cool. Well, let's dive into LinkedIn. So we're going to spend the next 45 minutes or so just hearing from Katherine, like her perspectives and her ideas about what a LinkedIn profile should be. And just to be really clear, these are Katherine's perspectives. These are not perspectives of LinkedIn. She's not speaking on behalf of LinkedIn. This is not like official, like LinkedIn, way to do things. But walk us through a little bit, like maybe like really high level, like what kinds of things are we going to get into? And then from there, we'll actually dive into some of these. And I'll actually show my LinkedIn profile and we'll kind of like guinea pig that a little bit kind of as we go, and you're welcome to rip it apart by all means. Let us know what could be better, and if you're live on chat, feel free to drop your LinkedIn profiles in there and connect with one another. We're all here to help each other. We're all here to learn from each other's perspectives. I mean, I've been using LinkedIn for a little while, but I was really excited to have Katherine on the show just so I could learn how to do LinkedIn better, and so I'm here to learn as much as all of you. So Katherine, I'll let you take it from here.
Yeah, of course.
Sorry, I'm just going to go over to this screen right here, and we'll show my LinkedIn profile here. And we'll take it away from here.
Awesome. So we are just going to dive into all the different aspects of the profile. We'll start from the top and walk down section by section. And we'll talk about what are most important for recruiters, for job search, but then also just for personal branding purposes as well. And we'll take it all the way to the bottom, and then we can talk about some of the other aspects of LinkedIn, such as posting on LinkedIn or doing a job search as well. All right. So let's dive in here. So taking a look at the LinkedIn profile, we've got Ian's up here. The first thing you always want to start with is that profile picture. And that is one of the most recommended attributes to have on your profile. It depends on your privacy settings, whether or not that shows up, but as long as you feel comfortable, definitely get a good picture in there. You want great background lighting. You want it to be close up. I've seen some pictures where people are really, really far away, and it's hard to tell who it even is a picture of. So make sure that it's close up. It's framing your face really nicely. And then you have some kind of professional attire. It doesn't look like you've got a V-neck or something, where it's a little bit questionable what's being worn. Just make sure that it's professional attire. I've honestly seen some where people are taking it in the car, or they're taking it with their kids or their animals, and that's all great. But LinkedIn being a professional community and professional platform, it's recommended it's just a picture of you. So once you've got a nice profile picture there, we'll go to the header image, and here on Ian's, he has the techinterview.guide in the back, which is really great for marketing purposes. This header image doesn't matter too much to recruiters, but what it does matter is for anyone who might want to be part of your network. This is something that they see right away, and it tells them about you. So if you have something you're marketing, if you run your own business, if there's a cause that you care about, this is a really great place to highlight any of those interests, your location, maybe an industry you're in. So it's more for you and your personal branding rather than for the purpose of recruiters. Okay, so moving down here, we have the headline. And so Ian says, Director of Engineering Learning at Stream. The headline should usually be a current or seeking position description. So what that means is it could be the title of your current position, or if you're open for work, you could list that in there, open for work in X, Y, and Z position. Let's say you're a student and you're looking to get into a particular industry. You could say seeking opportunities in X, Y, and Z industry. Some people will also make it a statement of their personality, their skills, or their passions. So you'll see people say relationship builder or deliver of delightful customer experiences, right? So if you're not actively looking for work and you are satisfied with where you're at and you just want to share more about yourself, this is a great place to do that. I think mine, so right now I have to say, I'm working on my profile and redoing a lot. So it's kind of in progress, but it used to say engineer, executive director, and educator, I think. And so it just had the 3 lines in between. And I loved it because they all started with E and it just felt very clean. But then as I got some feedback actually, and so as I was going through my profile, I started out with engineer in that headline, but then the rest of my profile was focused on my executive director position. So I run a foundation, just so everyone's tuned in. So the rest of the profile was focused on that executive director position, which became, the feedback was it became really confusing for other people. You're starting out with engineer, but now the rest of your content is focused on these other causes that you care about. So make sure that when you're looking at that headline, it's on brand. It's on point for the messaging that you want to send out to everyone and what you're currently doing in your career. Or as I said, if you're open to new work, seeking a position, then make it forward focused. Okay, so the next section is going to be location. If you are not looking for work, this doesn't matter too much. However, if you are, let's say, you really want a position, I don't know, you're in upstate New York and you really want a position in the metro area. Well, then you might change your location to have it be New York City, because what that will do is it'll impact SEO and your search relevancy. So if you have recruiters who are looking for candidates, particularly in New York City, and yours is, Syracuse or something like that, well, then you want to change it because it'll help filter you into those search results. And really you're adjusting it to where you want to be and where you're searching for that next move. So
quick question,
yeah,
quick question about that, Catherine. So I live right between Denver and Boulder, and they're both like really hot spots for like technical jobs. Should I list Denver? Should I list Boulder? Is it okay to have like Arvada, which is right in between the two? Because like nobody knows where Arvada is.
yeah,
Like what should I put on there as a location then?
yeah, that's a
Or would
great
that
question.
depend on like where I want to be working?
Yeah. So for you in particular, you're in between those two cities. Let's say you're looking for your next position in Boulder, then I would put Boulder. I don't know of any
Okay.
recruiter who's going in and searching in Arvada unless their company is based in Arvada, let's say. So put it where you
Okay.
want to be. For me personally, I would want to keep it as accurate as possible. So if I live in New York City, I'm probably not going to put, Los Angeles on there, even though that's where I'm looking for work, right? But if it's a small difference between, a 20-minute separation between the cities, then to me, that's totally fine.
Okay.
Okay.
Cool. We had a quick question in chat. Maybe we can get to this real quick. So Jen
Mm-hmm.
Develops asked really good questions in chat. Thanks for hanging out with us tonight, Jen. She said you mentioned in your background, or that your background in teaching helps with breaking down concepts to communicate more clearly. What tips do you have for those of us who don't have that kind of background? How can we communicate more effectively? I know
Oh,
it's kind
that's
of a
such a
side topic for a sec, but it's a good question to dive into.
It's a really good question. And honestly, this is something I love talking about because there's such this notion within tech of you need to be science, you need to be math, it needs to be hard skills. And honestly, I believe I got into tech because of my softer skills, emotional intelligence, ability to communicate, ability to lead teams. Those are almost undervalued, but so necessary, in my opinion, within the tech industry. And so, if you don't have a background, let's say in teaching in particular, we're humans, and my personal opinion is everyone communicates, right? And so, what I would do is not doubt so much based upon your background that you don't have those skills. Actually, go through and do a reflection. And there are a lot of soft skills that we just have naturally as humans, needing to communicate, needing to break down ideas. And while those could be refined, there's plenty of courses out there and plenty of books. I think the first step is adjusting that mindset to say, rather than I don't have that background, maybe it's, maybe that's doesn't necessarily depend upon your background, and maybe it can be reframed as, what do I do on a daily basis just to get through, and how can I leverage that as a technical asset for that next professional move that I'm trying to make.
Awesome. Great, thanks. We
Mm-hmm.
had another question in chat, but I think we'll get to that in a minute. They were asking about the skills tests on LinkedIn. So I think we'll get to that one in a little bit, because that's a little bit farther down
Yeah.
on the profile.
Yep, we'll get there. Cool.
All
So
right,
the
so we got
next,
location. So where do we go from there?
yeah, the next section is going to be industry. So this isn't something that shows up on your profile, but when you are creating your profile and determining your contact information and what shows up in this top part, your company, your education, so on and so forth, those top details, you pick an industry. This one is also really important for recruiter search. So if you, let's say, are looking for a position in education, then you put that industry as education. And when recruiters are doing that search, right, you're more likely to turn up. So it just helps with SEO. Now, sometimes there are industries on there that don't match the actual industry you're in. Just pick whatever feels most accurate and relevant for you. Okay. So the next section is going to be contact information. The only thing I really have to say about that is that's how recruiters are going to get in touch with you. So don't put an email on there that you don't regularly check. Make sure that it's up to date. Okay, so then there's one section that you don't actually have on here, Ian, and so you might want to add. You're able to add what's called creator mode. And so basically you can say that you are a content creator on LinkedIn. It's the beginnings of walking down the path of being almost a thought leader. And so you can add up to 5 hashtags to say, these are the things that I talk about. So when you go into creator mode, which you'll see inside your settings, you can turn that on and you can add 5 hashtags that could be, resumes, interview, professional coaching, something like that. You get to pick what those are. But then those hashtags are associated with your account. And when people are looking for someone who talks about resumes, again, that helps you kind of bubble up in the search. So that would be one recommendation if you are looking to become more of a thought leader, get your voice out there, be associated with trending content. That's a good area to add. The next part that also isn't on Ian's profile, but definitely could be added if it's appropriate, is open to. And so what that means is you have the ability to add a different section that you might be open to. Some people are open to work. If you're hiring, some people are open to hiring, right? Some people might be interested in mentoring others on the LinkedIn network or joining a nonprofit board. These are all things you can say you're open to. And then when other people come to look at your profile, they can reach out to you, either to apply for a job, to recruit you, to ask you to be on their board, those kinds of things.
Now, Katherine, when I look at that, so when I click on the open to dropdown, I only see finding a job, providing services, or hiring. How do I get to be a mentor and things like that? How do I see those as options?
Yeah, so let me verify here because I just want to make sure that I give you the right information, but I believe it's under, let me see. I see the same ones as you do. So I'm going to say I don't know. That is something that I will have to look deeper into.
It's on there somewhere.
But I have seen profiles where that is an option. Yeah.
Okay, great.
Cool. So far we've talked about, just this top section of the profile. Again, I want to highlight that if you're looking for a job, the biggest ones is having a photo, an accurate location, and then the accurate industry. The rest is just kind of beefing up your profile, making it more personal. All right, so we can move down here. Moving down, let's go to the featured section. Actually, before I do that, we're going to bop back up to the top. And I just want to point out a couple of other attributes. So one thing that is new to LinkedIn is being able to add a cover story. And so if anyone's unfamiliar with what a cover story is, basically inside of your profile image, you can record a video introduction of yourself. So you can set it inside of LinkedIn using the mobile app and say, hey, this is Ian. This is my live stream channel. Come and join me on Thursdays and Sundays, something like that. And so anytime someone looks at your profile, they can see that video, right? Super cool. Yeah, so that's a new feature that we have. And then you also have the pronunciation of your name. So if you have a name that you just want people to be able to pronounce or that people often have trouble with, you can add that too. They can click on the audio button within your profile and hear exactly how to say your name. That's super helpful if you're doing interviews or you speak with people a lot and they mispronounce your name. The next one I'll touch on is...
Sorry, how do they set the audio? Is that also through the mobile app and they like actually record their voice? Like, this is how I pronounce my name? Oh, cool.
Yep, exactly. Yeah, it'll be a recording of your voice.
Nice.
Yeah.
I was worried it was going to be like I have to phonetically say like capital E and then like the word in, like E
Nope.
in, Okay, cool.
No, you'll just record Ian Douglas and then they can listen and they know how you prefer to say it. So, cool. Okay, the next section is pronouns. That's something that is also new that not everyone knows about. I know that Ian has them on here. He, him, she, her, they, them, or you can also customize it. Those are all options. So definitely feel free to add those on up there if you like. Okay, so moving down to the summary section and the featured section, so going down a little bit further. The featured section is wonderful. I think it's highly underutilized, but it's amazing. And the reason why I love it is it's a great place to highlight your portfolios, or if you're in a blog or a magazine, or you have a newsletter, or for instance, I'm teaching a course coming up in September. So I pinned the post about my course right in my featured section. This would be a great place where, maybe you pin like a post about your Twitch channel or something like that, this live stream, right? So any rich media that you want to add in that featured section allows people to go and view more of your work. So this could be great for designers, developers, anyone who's creative. The next section is going to be the About section. So this is your summary. And this can be as long or as short as you like. And the way that I like to structure this is past, present, future, and dreams. And what that means for me is, hey, this is what I used to be doing, this which led me to what I'm doing now. And as I move forward, I plan on doing X, Y, and Z, or I'm moving in this kind of direction. And then the dream section is where I love to place purpose, mission, vision, values, any larger cause that you find as a driver of your work. So for me, my purpose is serve widely, give greatly. And so that's something that, again, I'm revising my profile, but I used to have at the bottom there just to say that everything that I do is motivated by this purpose. And so when a recruiter comes to meet me, or when someone makes a connection, they know what my values are and what's driving me. And that opens up the door to other opportunities. People might say, wow, based on this person's character, their values, their dreams, they might be interested in X, Y, and Z opportunity. So again, I like to do past, present, future, and then dreams.
Yeah, that's actually a really neat perspective on that. I've actually been told in the past that my summary was too aggressive against recruiters because I have kind of a love-hate relationship with like third-party agency recruiters that in our industry we also call them headhunters, although it's a bit more of a derogatory term. But the people that call you up and then try to like pitch your resume to a company to try to fill a job. And I used to have like, just, if you're a recruiter, don't even call me, don't waste my time. I'm going to mark you as spam, because LinkedIn used to allow you to like send or like mark someone's profile or incoming message or incoming connection request as spam. And I used to like just pile the hate on recruiters in the summary. And I did a like a nano degree through Udacity a while back, and part of their coursework is they actually go through and they evaluate your LinkedIn and your GitHub and all this kind of stuff. And they actually gave me some feedback, and they're like, dude, you need to like tone this down like a lot. I'm like, why? I hate recruiters. Like, I got a whole section of my blog just about recruiters and how much I don't like them. And they're like, no, it's too aggressive. You need to knock it off. I'm like, all right. So I toned it down a little bit. And now I just have what I'm open to and what I'm not open to. But yeah, I got a whole section on my iandouglas.com blog if anybody wants to go in. They're fairly old articles now. They're like 10, 15 years old. But yeah, good times.
That's so awesome.
But
Yeah,
I
I
like the past, present, future kind of idea. I think that's a clever way of thinking about it. Sorry to interrupt. It was just from the perspective of a hiring manager of like, if this is where I'm going, like if this is where our company is going, and you know, now I get a little more information about who you are as a person and what drives you, and a little bit more about your background, and sort of, you know, I can sort of kind of glean that direction a little bit more for where you're headed in life. I can see like how much more closely we're aligned on that. That's actually a really good perspective on it. I hadn't thought of that.
Yeah, and it also follows, the hero's journey in a way, right? It's a good way to hook people, wrap them in, get them reading what that content is. And you know that recruiters are always asking that question. What's the biggest challenge that you faced or a time that you failed? So if you put it in that about section, right? I was doing X, Y, and Z, then I hit this blocker or this became really challenging, so I decided to pivot over here. That already answers some of those questions for them, and they can start to determine if you're a good company and culture fit, if that's a response that they already have scripted out as an an acceptable response that they would want. So it already gives them a cue as to whether or not they want to reach out to you.
That's great.
Okay, cool. The last thing that I would add about the summary is a call to action. So originally I had at the bottom, please see my profile for more information. And the feedback I got was that is a terrible call to action. One, because people usually just look at the top section of your profile anyways, and they're not going to scroll through to get more information. They just want to get it right there in the about section. So rather than asking them to do that, for instance, you could say, I'm a developer, but I love public speaking. If you'd like to book me, visit my website. Okay, that's a clear call to action. You're not asking me to read through more things, right? Yeah. Okay, cool. So go for it.
Oh, I was going to say, I like to tell people to do that on their cover letters as well. Like when you're taking the time to write a cover letter, you don't want to end it on a very soft note. You want a very distinct call to action, like I'm available any afternoon between 2 and 4 for a phone call, or you can reach me at your convenience any morning until 11 a.m. Or, like give them a specific time frame and say like, I'm waiting for your phone call. But if you kind of leave it on sort of softer wording, like, if you're interested, you can call me, or, I look forward to maybe hearing from you. It's like, well, it's kind of like the Carly Rae Jepsen song of Call Me Maybe, right? It's like, no, you want them to call you. Just tell them, like, call me. Here's when you can reach me. Like, just make it a very strong call to action that's like really compelling for them. And I like the idea of putting that in the about as well. What I guess I don't like about the about statement here is it tends to compress. And so it only shows like a couple of lines and then like a little read more link on there. And so you've got to almost put the call to action at the top, maybe to say like, click here to read more about me, but here's like the following. Because otherwise, if they're just kind of scanning that information, I wonder how much they would miss it unless they're specifically clicking on the read more kind of thing that expands that box to be a little bit taller.
Yeah. And that probably just depends on how they go about viewing a profile. Maybe some have more focus on the experience. Maybe some really like to get into the details of the about, and they know they're going to have to click the read more button anyways, but that's a good point.
Yeah.
So the next section is going to be activity. And this is one that's really great for other people who want to connect with you. So for example, there was a VP of a company that I wanted to connect to, and not someone that I knew. So this was a cold outreach. And I looked at their activity and was able to see what kind of things are they commenting on, what are they liking, what are they celebrating? And that tells me more about the things they support, what aligns with their values, the people that they care about, which gave me in particular more content around how to speak to and connect with this person. So you might find that your connections are looking through that activity for that purpose that I mentioned. Beyond that, I haven't seen, too much emphasis on that activity portion in general. On the cautionary side, people can see that activity. So if you are saying, I've seen people say, builder of relationships, but then the comments that they're having is blah, 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 like, don't you understand, something negative, right? And so you could always have people look in there and say, wow, what they're actually doing online doesn't match what they're portraying themselves to be. So just
That's good.
like be careful that way. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's
Good
move
point.
down to experience. Yeah, for sure. So on these two sections that we've kind of looked at, about is important, but so is your experience. And this is something that you really want to be up to date, especially if you're looking for a new position. I used to have everything under experience. So when I was in college, I worked at Qdoba, I've worked at a boutique. I think I've worked at Whole Foods. So I put these different things on there. And the reason being, actually, is I wanted other students to see that someone who worked at LinkedIn has also worked these small jobs. So it was more about showing them the journey. But for the sake of this conversation, the point was I had everything on there. And so that is not necessary by any means. What I would recommend is if you are looking for a position, right? No worries. If you're looking
I
for
have
a
like
position,
every job on there. I've got like 20 tech jobs or something in the last 25 years. I list everything on here. Should I take some of the old stuff off? Like, is that just because like we tell people like when you build a resume, like really only the last 10 years matter anyway. So should I only keep the last 10 years worth of stuff on my experience? Or should I have other stuff on there? Because typically on my resume, I'll put like whatever's relevant to the job I'm applying to, and then I'll put a little note at the bottom of my experience block on my resume saying, for my full work history, like go look at LinkedIn. Like I got everything over there, and actually link them over here to my LinkedIn, so that if they are curious about like the other roles or they want more information about what I've done at each position, they can go in and they can look at that. Should I limit that, or should I keep everything on there? Or what do you think matters, like when like someone like yourself, like you come from a much more diverse background. I've always been in tech, but for someone like yourself where you've been in a lot of different things, and now you run this other foundation, like how much do you balance like what you put on there as far as like experiences and things like that?
That's a really good question. So I originally joined LinkedIn, years ago, and it was the first social platform that I was on. And the reason being is I loved being able to list all of the accomplishments. And I use this as a personal, let's say, bookkeeping system of everything that I had ever done. And so now I'm learning to use and curate my LinkedIn profile for finding that next position, if need be. And so that would change my response. So what I'll say is it depends on how you're using LinkedIn. If this is where you want to put all of that information and look for yourself, wow, I've done this, I've done this, I've done this, go back and reflect, then keep it on there. It's up to the viewer whether or not they want to hit the like 5 more experiences button, a couple of times. But if you're trying to get another position, or for myself, I went from teaching into engineering. And like I mentioned, my profile was really focused on the nonprofit work that I was doing. I've gotten feedback, let's take some of this off here and just focus it into the tech industry and into engineering as much as possible. So I removed a ton of that content. And I think, I only have like 5 experiences, and half of them are like internships I had after touring, and those kinds of small things that may not be as meaningful, but what it says is engineer, 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 and it sends that solid message of where I'm headed and the industry I'm in. So I would say for you, Ian, it's kind of up to you how you want to leverage this. If yours clearly says you're in the tech industry, like you have a very fluid message here. So if you took some off, like it would still be a consistent message. It's just whether or not you have the same number of experiences. So yeah, the other thing, sorry, did you want to jump in?
No,
Okay.
No, I was just saying thanks.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. So what I would say for anyone here is keep your format consistent. And you've done a really nice job of that. Under each one, you have a description of what you've done. I've seen some people eliminate the description. Whichever way you go, I would just say be consistent. Some people use bullet points, but then they'll forget to add the bullet points on other ones. So my preference is no bullet points, but if you want to use them, again, just keep it consistent. Um, and then, we have options here to add whether it's full-time, remote, apprenticeship, contract. I think those are some of the options. Feel free to add those if that's valuable for you. Freelance might be another one. I think you have it on here too. So I would say that's important if you are specifically trying to have a certain type of work. If you want to be remote, if you want to communicate you're a freelancer. Otherwise, I kind of shy away from it as just extra information that someone has to look at when it may not be as valuable for them. So it really just depends on the kind of work you're going for.
Okay.
So yeah. Additionally, what I would say is under experience, make sure that you're using verbs to describe what it is you're doing, just as you would do on a resume, and that those verbs are different. So rather than saying, taught, and then under the next one, taught, and then, whatever, so on and so forth, make sure that it's consistent in using verbs, but then those verbs are different every time. The last thing I'll say under experience.
On that as well, sorry to interrupt. On that as well, how do you feel about like present tense versus past tense? Like should a current job be present tense language and like everything else should be past tense language? Or should just everything be past tense or everything sort of present tense as far as like this is what I'm doing at this job I did 5 years ago? What do you think is fitting there?
Yeah, that's such a good question. I like to do everything past tense if it's something I'm no longer doing, present tense if I'm still doing it, right? And that brings up another point around the summary. A lot of people, there's this great debate. Do I write it in first person or do I write it in third person? And I've seen people who are more like have a very well-established career path. I'm just going to pull out big names, let's say Tony Robbins or Oprah Winfrey. Like their about sections would be written in third person because they're such a prolific public figure. But I don't know, it's kind of a personal call whether you want to say, Ian Douglas has done this versus I do this, right? But just wanted to throw that out there because there's a big debate about which way to go.
I have a feeling that for big names like Oprah and Tony Robbins, it's written in third person because they're not writing it themselves. It literally is someone else saying, yeah, this is stuff that Oprah has done. Therefore, Oprah has, blah, blah, blah. They're not in there tweaking it themselves, I bet. So I'd actually be pretty impressed if Oprah's on LinkedIn, like updating her own LinkedIn profile.
I know, me too. So definitely I would say, just to reiterate, past tense, present if you're doing it right now. But the last thing I want to say under experience is adding in metrics. So I would recommend this for resumes as well, but adding in, if you closed a deal, well, how big was the deal? Tell me how much it was closed for. If you manage a team, how big is that team? Just adding in those additional numbers helps give people a scope of the kind of work you're doing and the scale that you're doing it at. Okay. So the next one, yeah, exactly. The next one is education. From my experience, this can be good. Let's say, if you're moving into a developer role and they really want to see that you have that computer science degree, then add it on there. If you are changing careers, sometimes it can be valuable, especially if they're looking for, must have a bachelor's. But in general, education, what I would say is if you have it, put it on there. If you don't, it's not a big deal. This isn't a section that's as heavily looked at.
Okay. I do know some companies, though, that do actually put a lot of emphasis on, like, if you've gone to a top tier school, then they want that on the resume and they want to see it like right at the top of the resume. And so very similar to how you would adjust like sections on your resume. If you're applying at a job at a company where education is important to them, then you're going to want to move your education block up top. Like you can rearrange these sections a little bit too, right? So we may
Mhm.
want to move that education part up because they are going to be looking for that. And you don't want them to, like in my case, I just went to a community college. So mine's like way at the bottom because nobody cares about my education 25 years into my career. Like no one cares where I went to school. And so for me that's less important, but I think especially for if you're still fairly new in the industry, I would probably want to see that education up a little bit higher up, just so I can see where you've learned the skills that you claim to know. Very similar to how I would want to see it on a resume, but again, that's just my own sort of bias of like how I look for things. But maybe something to keep in mind for like how you want to rearrange the sections. If a company is looking for specific kinds of education, like they're looking for a degree and you've got a degree in that thing, move that up top so they don't have to like hunt on the page maybe to find that information about you.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Um, and that is changing in some industries, so be aware of that emphasis and how it's placed in an industry. A lot of companies are moving to skills-based hiring. Um, some others are very traditional, as Ian was saying. So, okay. Um, the next section is going to be your volunteer section. So these are less, not necessarily less important, but less looked at. Let's say it that way. So these are more for you, for your community, for maybe topics you want to talk about or things that you care about, less about the job search. So volunteer experience is a great way to round out your profile and demonstrate your values, your character, how much you engage in the community. This might be important if you're looking for a particular job, let's say that's in the nonprofit sector. Well, they want to know, how much volunteer experience do you have? To me, that would make sense that they would be looking there. Um, and then often people want to connect with you, because of these values that you have, or, oh, we both volunteered for Boys and Girls Club or something like that. So if you have it added on there, the next section is going to be skills and endorsements. And I know we had a question about this. So I'll talk through a couple of things and then we can circle back to that question. But basically, keep these aligned to your industry. Again, so you might have many more skills. Maybe we're in finance and you're now moving into product. And so maybe you have some skills in finance, but adjust it for where you're headed and where you're trying to get to. The one other thing I would say around this is endorsements. Endorsements are great because they have peer validation. So on your profile, and you have career counseling, which is 38 endorsements, management is 31. I mean, that's huge. That's a lot of peers who are saying, yes, we know that you do great work in this area. So if you already have a ton of endorsements, no need to clear that off. I think for me, that peer validation is more important than refining the skills to match your next position. But if you're just starting out, I would pick your skills carefully. And then we had a question around the
Can
skill quiz,
can
I
other
think.
Yeah, I was gonna say real quick, can other people see like who validated? Like I know I can go in, I can see who gave me an endorsement for a particular skill, but can other people go in and see like who endorsed for a particular skill? Like I'm thinking of student groups, for example. We would tell them, like at Turing, for example, we'd say, hey, go on LinkedIn and endorse one another. Like you're all here learning Ruby or you're all here learning JavaScript. Like go onto each other's LinkedIn and like endorse each other for those things. But then you end up with like 30 endorsements, but it's just from a peer who's also been learning the same sort of type as you. Like how like can they see, like can someone else go to my profile and see who endorsed me for a skill or just the number?
Yep, so I just did it and I can see all of your 31 endorsers for management.
Oh, really?
So yeah,
Okay.
you can see.
So
So
so I wonder how much that would play into like a hiring manager's decision. I mean, I look at some of these. I sometimes don't give a lot of weight to like really high levels of endorsements, um, because I like part of me always wonders a little bit like, are they real? Are they fake? Like, did you do one of those like pay somebody $5 and they'll get you like 1,000 people to endorse you for a skill kind of thing, or are these like legitimate things without having to go through and like click through all these profiles and see who they are? Or if I see, oh, you claim to know Python and everybody that endorses you is also really new at Python, it's like, okay, well, you know some Python, but like how well do you really know that Python? Like there's no like sort of scale on like, oh, Ian's like really, really like
Mm.
advanced at this versus like, you know, I heard Ian mention that he programs in Python once, so I'm just going to endorse him for Python without like really knowing. Um, Although LinkedIn does have a thing where, like, if I go to your profile, it'll say, you know, which of these four people, you being one of them, would you endorse for a particular skill? And so I think LinkedIn is working on something kind of behind the scenes of like, you know, maybe deepening that endorsement a little bit more. Do you know anything about that, or can you speak to that at all?
Yeah, I don't actually, but what I would say is, for me, it comes down to integrity. If I'm asking my entire graduating class of Turing to, endorse me for React, is anyone really looking at that? They're probably not. But does it feel good to me? I don't know. If we're all just mutually endorsing each other, like how valuable does
Right.
that become? That kind of dilutes it a little bit. But yeah, I've seen what you're talking about it too at the top, where you can say, which of these four people is best in leadership or whatever. But beyond
Right.
that, I don't have any more information.
Okay.
Yeah. And then just to touch on the skills quiz, and we'll see if we answer the question, you can definitely do quizzes for different skills. So I've done one for JavaScript and CSS. And I think that adds additional validation that, yes, I've passed this quiz. Um, I will say again, kind of to your point, Ian, what does that actually mean? And does it mean that you were able to pass this quiz, and could any beginner pass the quiz? Or does it mean you are a CSS master and this is really, really meaningful? There's not a huge indication of what that skill level is. So I don't know if that answered the question, but.
Well, let's go back and so the question is, do the skills tests on LinkedIn do anything for you? I mean, to some degree, it shows that you can answer it because it is a time limit. Like you have to answer it
Mhm.
within a certain amount of time. And so unless you're really good at Google to like go look up an answer and then like put it back in there, um, you know, I think it does test pretty decent rudimentary knowledge of a given technology. But I found like even just doing these five, you know, Git, JavaScript, JSON, Python, and Ruby on Rails, um, some of the questions actually get pretty advanced, and I think you only have to get like 75% of them right to get the badge. So you don't have to get a perfect score. Um, does it mean anything? Yeah, it means that you're able to answer a quiz about like some basics about the language. And for some hiring managers, it's like, cool, now I don't have to ask like, you know, maybe what's a REPL in Python, or,
Mhm.
you know, tell me what active record is in Rails, or tell me about like what a closure is in JavaScript or something like that. Like if I know what's on these badges, you know, tests, and I see that you've got that badge, maybe that's one less like screening question I need to ask, and I can get into like something else a little more meaningful as part of that screening process, because I can see that, okay, clearly you know some trivia about these languages, you can get through like a quick little time limited test. Would that completely get rid of like a screening call? Probably not. But I think it could give some confidence to the person looking excuse me, looking at your profile, and who wants to interview you on that technical level, to go, okay, well, you've got a little bit of rudimentary knowledge in that, and so
Mhm.
maybe I don't have to ask as many questions, or the questions don't have to be as deep, or I can go much deeper in some other area because I know you've answered like some basics, and can
Mhm.
get through some of those basics.
That's a really good point. And it depends on who's looking. If it's, let's say, a hiring manager and they have a technical background, it's going to mean something different than if it's a recruiter who knows nothing about the details of what CSS is, let's say, but they just know that it's a requirement for the job. And then you have that skills quiz. It's, as you were saying, a verification or further validation that, yes, what you're proclaiming to know, you do know something about. So,
Great.
cool.
Cool. And then
Okay, so let's move.
how do you feel about, yeah, sorry, how do you feel about like the recommendations and the accomplishments and stuff like that?
Mhm. Yeah, for sure. Let's move down to that. So, my philosophy on recommendations is, first, you've got to earn them, then gift them, and then ask to get them. And so, what that means is, first of all, do good work. And then if people, be of the mindset that if people are doing a really good job around you, be others oriented and make sure you give them a recommendation. Acknowledge people, shout them out for the great work that they're doing. Then from there, do the same. Reach out, whether it's the same people, whether it's professors, bosses, whoever it may be, a peer. That's all great. But I would say, for me, the biggest like value add around this section is internalizing that mindset of recognizing the great work that other people are doing. And then that is always, or most often, reciprocated, especially if you ask for it. And in terms of, actually reading through the recommendations, I think it's super valuable to see who the person is, what their background is, and what they're saying. That alone can be a really good indicator of that person's skill level. So if I have, a junior developer who's recommending me, and we worked on a project together, that's very different than if I have our VP of engineering who's recommending me and saying I did a great job on a project. So these can be very valuable. I don't know that they're looked at too often, but I think that has a lot of social capital. Okay. And then in terms of accomplishments, there's a lot that you can add here. I'm seeing honors, awards, languages, organizations, publications. You can add courses that you took in school, causes that you care about. Maybe you have patents. We already have publications on here. These are all really great places to add just extra things that you're involved in, additional information about you. I think the language one is super important, especially if you're applying for a job where you're required to speak, a language that someone wouldn't automatically assume. So let's say you're from the US, presumably you speak English, but you're applying for a position in Spanish, definitely list that on there so someone can see that you've verified you can speak that language. So I think these are nice to have. As an example, I've done some hackathons within LinkedIn, and I used to have that in the description under LinkedIn on my profile. And my feedback was, it just gets kind of cluttered and it's not really associated with any particular position. So I put that down under honors and awards that I had, participated and won those hackathons. So that's just like a great way of organizing information. And then the last part here, we have interests. This one I think is also undervalued. To my knowledge, and again, this is just my personal opinion, but interests can be really good for recruiter search as well. If you say, hey, I'm really wanting to work for IBM, then go and follow IBM. Not only will you get information about that company, you'll see what are they working on, are they hiring, what's their next big move or big play, and that further informs you if you actually get an interview. But recruiters can search by people who are interested in the company. That already aligns this big candidate pool with their search and says, hey, I want to pull directly from people who have already researched the company and expressed interest. So again, it's kind of at the bottom of the page and a little bit overlooked, but I think it's really important to curate this for the things that you're interested, especially if you're looking to make that next move.
Great. Yeah, I think that's a great idea. I hadn't thought of it from like a recruiting point of view, like people can find you through those groups. I mean, I've had a few people reach out and go, hey, I see that you've been, in this Python group, forever, because I'm part of like a bunch of different groups in here. And they're like, hey, saw you were part of this Python, group. It's huge, 330,000 people in there. I've had people reach out through that. And so it can make a difference. Especially if they're like, if I'm looking for a Python developer, I'm going to go into that group because I'm going to have a huge reach if I post something in there to say, hey, I'm looking for a Python dev. I'm going to get a ton of people applying for that job. So, yeah, that's a good perspective. I didn't realize that would come up from a search side of it as well. Like, someone that goes in and like is searching for profiles, that they would be able to see that as well.
Yeah.
That's kind of cool.
Awesome. And I love that you have the causes you care about at the bottom. That part's good too. And so one thing I wanted to touch on next was your connections and your communities. And what I will just say real quickly is you can have people either connect with you or follow you, and you can change the button up in your top settings. And so if you really want to have a small, tight-knit community of quality connections, then you want people to be able to use the connect button. If you are looking to be a thought leader, or you're a public speaker, or just someone who's very public, then you would use the follow button. And so now people can follow you, they'll receive your content, but you're not actually connecting, so they're not part of your network. That makes a big difference when you're going to post, because now you can post to connections only or anyone. And so you would decide what kind of content you're posting, and whether it's to your high quality network or to everyone who's following you. And you can adjust it by doing that connect or follow button. And then the next thing I'll say is we're creating a bunch of different communities, and there's a lot of communities that already exist out there on LinkedIn. As you were just talking about, that's a great way for someone to post a job, or to say, they're open to work or something like that, and connect with the community. There's a community on there that I'm going to recommend specifically for this session, and it's LinkedIn Guide to Networking. It's a LinkedIn community that you can join, and they post a whole bunch of content on there around how to network on LinkedIn. So definitely go and join that one. And then the next thing that I would say, just to go along the same lines, has to do with LinkedIn Learning. And not everyone, has immediate access to LinkedIn Learning. I believe you have to have a premium account, but if you can get into LinkedIn Learning, I would recommend a course for this discussion as well. It's called Rock Your Profile, and it's by Lauren Jolda. And it talks about a lot of the things that I'm talking about here, but just how to make a really good LinkedIn profile. So if you have access to LinkedIn Learning, go check out the Rock Your Profile course.
Awesome. That's great. We had a question in chat. Is there a reason why LinkedIn doesn't let you give recommendations for those you've worked with in volunteer positions?
Okay, so this is a really good question. I don't have an answer for it, but it is something that has bothered me as well. And I want that capability. So you and I both will be waiting to see when that comes out.
Great.
Cool.
Cool. And then
for the
LinkedIn Learning that was called Rock Your Profile, you said?
Yep, it's Rock Your Profile by Lauren Jolda, Jolda. And that's really good just for going through all of these basics again, saying do's and don'ts, talking about branding, talking about what recruiters are looking for. And they share a lot of statistics about how many more views or search results you'll show up in, depending on what little elements you're adding to your profile. So you'll have X number more views if you have a profile picture, those kinds of things.
Great. And it looks like they have a free 1-month trial if you don't otherwise have access to it. It looks like they've got a trial period as well.
Perfect. That sounds good. Yeah, there's a lot of good learning courses on there.
Awesome. Well, this is good. I've definitely got some upkeep to do on my own that I hadn't thought to do on my own LinkedIn profile. So that's awesome. Cool. Any other questions in chat while we got Katherine on the call? Then we're going to kind of switch gears. We're going to do a couple of resume reviews. Katherine volunteered to help me look at a couple of resumes. And but we definitely want to make sure that we answer any other questions about LinkedIn while we got Katherine on the call.
And while we're waiting for those questions,
go ahead.
Yeah, while we're waiting for those questions to come in, I will just touch on 2 other aspects, which is posting content on LinkedIn and then job search. So when you are posting on LinkedIn, you have the ability to just do a couple of lines of text, almost like a tweet. You can add images, you can add hashtags. Those are 2 things I would recommend for most posts. When you add a hashtag, it's going to come up for anyone else that follows that hashtag or searches by that hashtag. When you add images, you add that rich media, which is much more engaging to look at than just text, and that can always benefit your post. The other thing is telling a story, right? So you can kind of follow that framework of having that hook, having some kind of conflict or challenge, and then what that resolution is if you're writing more of a longer post. If it's going really, really long and it's a almost like an article or a blog, you can write an article. That option is within the posting modal on LinkedIn. And you can also start your own newsletter. So that is an option. If you want to build your community, you can be sending out a newsletter weekly or monthly on LinkedIn. The last thing I would say about that is using at mentions as well. So you can do, at LinkedIn or at Katherine Lewis or at Ian Douglas, and you can tag people. And then that also increases just how much it's being viewed in their feed, because it's also tagging someone and they'll see it in their feed as well. And then in terms of job search, while we're waiting for more questions here, again, just want to say that there's always the easy apply button for certain jobs that want to just download your profile. And that's why it's so important, if you are looking for work, to have everything on your profile geared towards that next move and that industry you want to be in. Because then you can just go and do an easy apply, and that company will get all of your information on your profile. And it's just a very easy way for recruiters to look through it. And then the next thing that you can do is turn on job alerts. So you can go in and say, UX engineer in New York City, and then turn on a job alert. It's just right below the search bar when you're looking for jobs. And then every time that there's a new job that comes out, you'll be pinged. And that way you can be one of the first few applicants. Some jobs will get up to 200, 250 applicants, and recruiters will only look at the first, 10 or 12. So it's important to be part of that first cluster, and turning on job alerts really helps you get your application in early.
How do you feel about companies that try to use the easy apply, but then when you try to apply, they're like, oh, also fill in this form where you retype everything that's on your LinkedIn profile anyway?
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't make sense to me, especially as a UX engineer. I'd be thinking about that, saying this is not very user friendly and almost discourages me. I'm a little bit more meticulous and picky when it comes to choosing companies. And so if that's the process you're going to put me through in this one scenario, how else does that play out, as an employer, as a customer? So for me personally, that would have a lot of weight for me. But yeah, it's kind of up to the user.
Cool. Awesome. Well, we didn't have any other questions come in. We did have a Viable Clan member who sent in a follow earlier, so thanks for the follow. They've also offered to help people with mock interviews. You can reach out to them on Twitch. Viable Clan member is their username. They don't have a LinkedIn profile. You should totally get a LinkedIn profile. Oh, one last question just popped in. For your network, is there any value in connecting to people you don't really know? That's a good one. Me personally, I've tried over the years to only connect with people that I've personally met. Like when I first got started on LinkedIn, I was only adding people that I personally worked with, or I had personally met, or was like a friend of a friend that I had at least communicated with, that I wasn't going to put just complete strangers on my LinkedIn. I've since relaxed that over the last couple of years, to where I will add people that that reach out through the stream, or reach out through consulting that I've done with Interviewing IO, or customers from various companies and things like that. I'm a little more forgiving or free around who I add on my profile, but it varies a little bit. Like if it's a clear and obvious spam kind of thing, I won't add them at all. And if I add somebody and they immediately send me a message that's from an automated bot, or something saying like, hey, we should work together on this thing, or hey, my company provides X service, I immediately unfollow or break that connection. The other thing that I do on mine, and I've seen other people use this as a spam screening tool, because on the network connections, for example, when you have incoming connections here, you can kind of see, like, if they write you a little message like, hi Ian, blah 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 blah. But on my profile actually starts with my W, which is my first name, which is William. And so if they connect and say, hi W dot, and then blah 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 blah, then I know that they didn't really look at my profile, for one, and B, they really don't know me. Otherwise they would address me as Ian, because like everybody that knows me is Ian. And
Mhm.
so I just immediately dropped them. Also, my new role at Stream is director of engineering learning. They stop reading a director of engineering and go, oh, you're a director of engineering, you say. Well, we've got all kinds of like, offshore contractors, or we've got all kinds of like services, or hey, if you're trying to build an Android app for your business, it's like, did you even look at what my business does and what Stream actually does as a business? Like, we don't need you to build us an Android app. Like, thanks, but no. And so like I kind of miss that LinkedIn used to allow you to mark those as spam. They took that away as a feature. Now at least when you decline, you can say I don't know this person, but I don't know how much weight that actually gives. Like, is that any sort of disciplinary thing? Like if they reach out to 1,000 people and 900 of them say I don't actually know this person, like do they get some kind of mark on their account that they're spamming network requests or connection requests? Or I'm a little curious how that works. Do you happen to know any of that, or can you speak to any of that at all?
I don't know, and I miss that, mark as spam button as well. And I don't know how that's being handled when you say you don't know them,
Bring
but
it back.
there's, yeah. Yeah, so I'll just speak to that real quick, Ian.
Yeah.
Just in terms of making connections to answer that question. So for me, when I'm accepting connections, I usually only accept people that I know, or if I don't know them in person, but let's say we had a good conversation on LinkedIn, I read one of their posts, I know that, we are interested in the same things or whatever, then I'm happy to accept that connection. Or let's say, people who are watching this live stream, if you want to go connect with me on LinkedIn, just drop me a note and say, hey, I was watching this. More than happy to connect. I just need a little bit more context so that way you are
Yep.
eliminating some of that spam, right? Um,
Yep.
and then the other thing I would say is I also have to check myself because I'm someone who will go out and connect with people that I've never met with. Usually there's a reason where you are both interested in the same thing, or I really want to, ask them about their career moves, or so I have some intention, but they don't know that. So I would say always add a note and explain why you're connecting. Don't just connect with people. And then for me, I have to recognize that I'm connecting with people who don't know me. And so I just kind of moderate that when I'm choosing to connect or decline someone.
Yeah, that's a great idea. I am far more likely to connect with someone that sends a note with the connection request. Sometimes though on the interface, like I worked with Graham in the past, not at eSalon, but we worked at I think the Rubicon project in the past. If I just click that connect button, it just sends that connection request. I don't even have the option anymore to actually send a note. I actually have to like click through to his profile, and then I think if I connect through there, I think it says, "Do you want to add a note?" So they've kind of
Mhm.
removed a layer of complexity, I guess, to make it easier. But now I don't have a way to send Graham a connection note saying, "Hey, remember me? We worked at Rubicon." So
Mhm.
that's a little disappointing that features change over time. But as
Mhm.
far as like building up the network, though, one thing that I really appreciate about LinkedIn is being able to do introductions on behalf of people. And so I will throw this out on the stream, and it's going on YouTube, so it's public record. If you want me to make an introduction for you via LinkedIn, I will do that within reason. Just go look at my profile, and I'm just going to use Catherine's profile as a way to do this. But if you were all looking at mine, for example, and you connect to me, here's a good way to figure out who I know that I can introduce you to. So imagine that Catherine was my profile. Find this spot here where it says 500 plus connections, or however many connections that person has, and click on that. Now you can do a job search and company search through their connections. So now I can come in here and say, does Catherine know anybody that works at Microsoft, for example? And now it's filtered down by who Catherine knows at Microsoft. And so all these second degree connections are my second degree connections through Catherine at Microsoft. And so, a lot of these folks are currently at LinkedIn, but used to work at Microsoft. But here's a manager at Microsoft, Drew Lewis, that I could then reach out to Catherine and say, hey, Catherine, could you introduce me to Drew? I want to talk to them about, some networking opportunities and just reach out, find out, what their group does at Microsoft, blah, blah, blah. And so I'm willing to do that within reason for people that watch the stream and subscribe on YouTube. Feel free to go to my LinkedIn profile, click on where I've got like 500 plus connections, because I've got like 3,000 plus connections, and then do your company search through there. Or you can, look through locations, or you can narrow it down by current company. For example, like if I really wanted like Microsoft as a current company, not as a past company, for example, you can do some of that. Or you can go into all filters and say, I only want to find like directors of engineering that Ian knows, for example, and you'll find that list. Like it'll filter all that down, and then reach out to me directly and say, can you introduce me to this person? Don't send me a thing on LinkedIn saying, do you know anybody at Microsoft? I've just now given you the instructions to find out if I know anybody at Microsoft. So you don't have to ask me anymore, who do you know at company X? You can go through my LinkedIn profile and see if I know anybody at company X, and then say, can you introduce me to Katherine at LinkedIn? I will happily make an introduction within reason. Like, don't bug me for like 50 requests, but if you got like a handful of people, if you're legitimately networking through the course of this week as you're doing your job hunt, absolutely reach out to me on LinkedIn and I will make some introductions for you. So that's how to use your network to like expand your network to get introduced to other folks. So cool. All right, ding dong, someone at the door. If anybody ever watched Craig Ferguson's Late Late Show, now I'm like, who's at the door? All right, well let's switch gears. Let's dive into a resume review. So Katherine, really appreciate your perspectives on LinkedIn. I think that's super helpful for a lot of folks. And definitely you can go back and you can watch the recording on YouTube later, and kind of go back over and kind of go back over your own profile and check for some of these tips and areas. I did see something in the chat go by going, wow, I had no idea LinkedIn had all these features. So you can definitely go in and check that out. So cool, let's dive in. Let's see, this first resume we're going to look at, the note that they attached for me said, I just graduated from a boot camp in February. I finished my last job in education and uprooted my family to Boston after living for 11 years in South Korea. I'd like to hear feedback on how I talk about my current projects and how I should discuss my previous job in education. So I figured this would be a great resume for Katherine to help look at. So we're going to start with that. I like to start my resumes kind of zoomed out, kind of take a look at, how do they use their white space on the page, and sort of like balance on the page. First thing that kind of stands out to me is there's a lot of content on here. And these bullet points are huge. So I would probably, just as a first pass, I would probably try to simplify these bullet points a little bit. Katherine mentioned earlier, when you're looking at the employment section on LinkedIn, try to do things in bullet points, but also try to quantify information as well. I think that's an important thing to do on a resume. And so that would be the first thing I'd probably do, is see if you can simplify those bullet points, keep some quantified information, and just make the page look less heavy as far as overall text. Katherine, any first impressions here?
Yeah, I would say that it's really good. It's clean, it's organized. I'm okay with the side panel. I usually don't use it or recommend it, but in this case, it's clean enough. I would just say at the bottom, there seems to be a lot of white space. So maybe make it even, the top to the bottom, and then those side margins as well. So that way it's clean all the way around the page.
Okay, great. Yeah, because up here we can kind of see like the right margin stops about here, but then it kind of starts jutting out here over on the right side. And here's the interesting thing is, people that look at resumes, I mean, they don't come from like a graphic design background, but I studied a little bit of graphic design in school. And so I notice things like that and I can articulate why it doesn't look good. But most people looking at a resume, they're like, something's weird. Don't know what, meh, pass. And I've said this on the stream before, when they're looking at a resume, they're looking for a reason to say no, because they got a lot of these to look through. And so they're trying to narrow it down. They're trying to sort of like get a much smaller group of resumes before they go into actually screening calls. And so they're looking for a reason to say no. And anything that feels off about your resume, like, they're just going to pass. They may come back to it another time later on if you come up as another job hit. They were like, oh, here's this John person again. You know, I remember seeing this resume before. Maybe I'll take a second look at it this time. But as a first pass, like first impression, sometimes they'll just go, nah, something's off. Can't say why. Can't really like articulate with words like what's wrong with the resume, other than it just looks weird. Um, and so like being aware of some of this stuff. This is why I like to go in and share some of those details. So yeah, I
Hmm.
agree with the white balance, or the sort of the spacing. There's a lot of space here at the bottom, and a lot of the stuff here, even in the gray left bar, bumps right up against that. You know, both edges, like edge to edge
Hmm.
text. I think you could probably like bring the margin in a little bit on that sidebar, just so vertically it goes a little bit longer on the page, and like maybe hit down to the very bottom of the page if possible, or closer to the bottom of the page.
Hmm.
Cool. Let's zoom in and we'll take a look from here. I don't know if there's a way that I can get rid of this sidebar over here or not. I don't think I can. Nope. Present mode. Nope, that didn't work. Let's try. Nope. Okay. So I can't. I mean, I can zoom in a little bit more from there if we need to. Um, but yeah, let's dive in a little bit more. So we see their name up here, kind of a different color. Their first name is in one color, the last name's in another color. Full stack web developer, and then a link to a website which they've anonymized. So it's just going over to google.com right now. Um, and then they've got a summary here. They've got some technical projects, and then they've got their professional experience, and then additional experience down here at the bottom. So Katherine, now that we're zooming in on it, what sort of stands out about the text on the page, like what you see here?
Yeah, that was a really good call out around the last name being a different color. I have no idea if this is a link or not. And if it is a link, that's my first inclination because it's blue, but I'm wondering what is this even connecting me to? Why is their last name linked? So I would immediately change that font color so that way it's consistent.
Hmm.
The next thing that I'm looking at, that contact information, it's very easy to find. I do like that it's line by line rather than having it span across the page like I've seen on some resumes. The next thing that I would say is interest and hobbies is taking up quite a bit of real estate. And while those are good things to add, their professional experience is not that long. The technical projects, they only have two. I understand that this is a student, but I'm sure that there are other things that professionally will tell me more about you than those interests and hobbies. And while those are great to have, I just would say, if we're missing out on content that's going to help you get that job because we're trying to put interests and hobbies on here, I would use that real estate for something else.
So you think having an interest section where someone would list something like karate would not be appropriate. I have a specific reason for calling that one out. People on the stream will maybe get the joke, but Jonan from the Jonan show, he often talks about like having an interest in a hobby thing like this on the resume to him is actually important. And so like when we talk about resume reviews, we always talk about like everybody's perspective is different and what everybody looks for in a resume is different. Jonan likes to see like, show me that you're human. You're not just, only work, project, nothing else. Like he actually really likes to see stuff that sort of differentiates you. Me personally, I would say like if you got to fill space with something and you really don't have anything else, then okay. But otherwise, like unless this is like a fitness company that you're applying to with this resume, adding like CrossFit, ultimate frisbee, hiking, things like that are not going to be as important to a company other than knowing that okay, you've got good balance in life, like you're not just all about work, all about projects and nothing else in life. I think it does show that you're happy to get in on some of that. I was a little curious about the video and board games where it says recreational and educational use. 'Cause, living in Colorado, the term recreational use has a bit of a different meaning for us out here, for different things. For some people, not me personally, but some people. Um, but yeah, I would say like if you really need to fill room on the page and you literally have nothing else, then I think having an interest in hobby section is okay, just so it doesn't look empty. But I could also argue you could probably reformat away from the 2-column format and just have a single column format if you really are that light on content. But then looking at the other content on the page, I'm like, you got a lot of content, so you've got things that could fill the page otherwise. I would probably drop the interests and hobbies unless the job you're applying to is specifically looking for things like, it's an activity kind of company, or they're looking for fitness, background or something like that, then absolutely a lot of this stuff would apply. Um,
Hmm.
yeah, that would be my take on that.
Yeah, I agree.
Um, I think from a consistency point of view, like they've got a space around the dash on the dates for their bachelors and their masters, but they don't for their code school. So like just being consistent with those things. Also, the dates on these two education, the date was on a separate line, where this one here it's kind of in line with the name of the program. I would probably separate those. Also,
Hmm.
you've got the name the of the degree in, or like the type of degree in bold, and then what the degree was, and then the name of the school in italics. The formatting here is very different, and so I would try probably structure it the same, like um, whatever certificate or diploma or whatever they call it at the school, like put that in that same bold. And then like Coding Dojo is the name of the school in this case. And so that would be like more along the lines of this italicized font or something like that, where full stack development would be, this non bold, all caps kind of thing. So just keep the
Hmm.
formatting consistent on that. Going back up here to the contact information, anybody looking at your resume knows that's a phone number, so you can get rid of the label. Depending on how you put your LinkedIn URL on here, you may not need to specifically call out that this was LinkedIn or this was GitHub, unless it's like a link where it's literally just the word LinkedIn, and when they click on that, it takes you over, or takes the person over to your LinkedIn profile. But another thing, maybe, Catherine, that we should mention about LinkedIn is how they can change their LinkedIn name, because by default,
Hmm.
when you sign up, it asks like what kind of username do you want, but then there's usually like a dash and then a bunch of hexadecimal numbers at the end of that. You can go in and customize that to be whatever you like. Um, should we show them real quick how to do that on LinkedIn, maybe?
Yeah, absolutely. That's a really good point. And I actually just changed mine from the default to match my personal
Okay.
website. So you all are welcome to visit me at pinkterminal.io. And I changed my LinkedIn URL to match that. So we can show them here. You're going to go to
Okay.
your home profile, and then it's up at the top right there for edit public profile.
Oh,
It's going
so
to be
up here in the
over
top
on
right
the,
corner. Okay. Yep.
yep.
And then it looks like it's still up here in the top right corner. So edit your custom URL, and this is where you can change what you want this to be. For me, the 736 is kind of a call out to my wife. Um, it's kind of how we met. It's a long story. I'll go into it someday, but yeah, you can basically customize it from here and get rid of that default, because having that sort of hexadecimal thing on the end is it's kind of annoying, and it just makes it super long if you're actually trying to print out the URL somewhere. But I think if you can have like even just linkedin.com/in/Ian Douglas 736 or something. Don't put my profile in your resume. Put your profile in your resume. But if this won't fit in whatever contact area you've got on your page, like if this was too long to put on John's, resume at like to fill in this whole line, then just make it a clickable link and just link over to whatever your profile is. But test these links. Like when you build this and you export like a doc format or a PDF format, actually like open it up and click on the links. Make sure it's going to where you expect it to go. Otherwise, when they click on it, it's not going to go where they expect it to go or where you expect it's going to take them. So make sure to test that. So you can just come in here and you can modify this. Um, and I think if you change it, correct me if I'm wrong on this, Catherine, if you know, if you change it, if someone goes to the old link, it'll redirect for a little while until someone else takes your old name. So similar to how GitHub does their redirect, if I go in and change my GitHub profile name from Ian Douglas to something else, anybody else going to github.com/Ian Douglas, they'll get redirected over to my new one. But as soon as a new Ian Douglas signs up, that redirect no longer works. And I think
Mhm.
it's the same on LinkedIn as well. So I think it'll actually redirect from your old one to your new one. So if you've got old resumes out there, it shouldn't impact that. But it's something to kind of keep in mind there.
Yeah, that's true. And I just want to add on with the links in your resume. The other thing that I've seen is people will link to password gated profiles or portfolios. And that's never fun as a recruiter to go to that link and now realize you need to reach back out to that person to ask for that password. So make sure that nothing is protected in terms of, your portfolios and your links.
For me as a hiring manager, I'm not even going to reach out and ask for it. I'm just not going to look at it. I'm just
Yeah,
not going to look at it
exactly.
at that point. It's not worth it. Um,
Yeah.
I mean, you know that I'm calling because I'm looking specifically at that information, but I'm not going to call just to ask for that and then have to call you back later if I decide I want to get on a phone screen with you. If it's password protected or paywall protected or something like that, I'm just not going to look at it. I'm not going to get to see it. So make sure that when you test your links, you test them in like an incognito mode or some sort of privacy mode or something within your browser to make sure that anybody that's trying to get to that link that they don't have to be logged in or anything like that. I think that would be good. Cool. All right. From there, so let's take a look at this summary. It says a software developer with over 10 years of international education, an agile learner, passionate about technology, eager to leverage global professional experiences, creativity, and expanding software development skills to create solutions, products, and services that have a meaningful impact on end users. Holy run-on sentence, Batman. Proficient in HTML, CSS, Bootstrap, JavaScript, Python, Django, SQLite, and Postgres. So I don't think you really need to tell me your technical skill stack here unless you can like build your own technical stack like skills section on a resume. I'd much rather see that than have to hunt around the whole page to try to find the skills. They do mention like Python, Django, Postgres, Bootstrap, but they don't mention SQLite anywhere after this point. JavaScript has a capital S, but I don't see JavaScript mentioned in any of this here at a glance. I kind of see Postgres buried again down here. So it's like really hard, like as someone technical, to like look through here and go, what do you know? Also, if I'm looking for a full stack dev, you're probably going to want to rearrange this list in the order that they're looking for. Like if I'm looking for a Python dev and I see you're proficient in all these things, but Python is way down the list, I like inherently people that read a list when they're looking at lists of skills like this, anything at the beginning of that list, you know better than what's at the end of the list, in my opinion. And so if I'm looking for a Python developer and that's the 5th thing on your list, that tells me you're probably not as good at Python as I would hope you to be. Although in this case, you're listing 2 Python projects. So now I'm kind of waffling on like, okay, well, maybe you know Python because you've got 2 projects. But Python wasn't listed as your strongest suit. You're listing HTML and CSS and Bootstrap up front. And so that tells me you're more of a front-end developer who knows Python, the way that I would read that list. Any thoughts, Catherine, on that summary?
Yeah, that's a really good point in terms of breaking it down, recognizing that the front end skills are being listed first. I think we naturally do that. That's the way we count. We go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So when we're reading a list, we put more weight on whatever is number 1. And this is kind of what I was referring to when we look back at interests and hobbies. You mentioned before, that it can be really valuable to see that someone's a whole person. Totally agree. And we could move all of these skills into that section and have them listed by bullet point, and it would be really easy to identify what these skills are rather than coming across them after a couple of run-on sentences in the summary. So that might be another way of restructuring this.
I like that they're calling out their technical projects first and then kind of showing their professional experience. They are quantifying some information in here, but they're giving me a lot of information about kind of their teaching background, where it's a big part of who you are as a person, but that's not who you have become as a person. So it is a big part of your past, but as Catherine was talking about, like past, present, future, It's part of your past and a little bit of your present, but it's not what you want your future to be unless you're looking for a development role in like education technology or ed tech. And so trying to find a job where they're specifically looking for an ed tech sort of background. I don't know that you need to give this much information about what you taught and where you taught and all the things that you taught. I think you could probably reduce this quite a bit. I think that might help. Might help just cut down a little bit on the text.
Yeah, just a couple of other things to add in here. Looking again at this resume, up at the top we said 10 years in international education. And then I see the dates, we've got what, 2016 to 21, so 5 years, and then before that, 4 years. That's a lot of experience. And when I look at how this resume is structured, the experience section is, probably the same length as the technical projects. So with 10 years of experience, I expect to see a lot more on the page and structured by the different positions that were held. So whatever happened under humanities teacher, put that under there. Same thing with assistant athletic trainer, break them out as opposed to having just key achievements and highlights, because now I don't know which one was which. Going back to your point around some of the actual content though, listing that you worked with Schoology or Power School or these different technical platforms that probably aren't going to mean anything as you're transitioning into technology unless you're working for an ed tech company. It doesn't matter. There is kind of unnecessary detail that doesn't add a whole lot of value, and recruiters may not even know what those platforms are. So it doesn't signal anything to them unless you're doing an ed tech position. And so just recognizing that if this was better organized, it would become more obvious, immediate, and right off the bat that there's 10 years worth of experience that this person has. I had no idea until I actually read that wow, they have a deep career history and are now making that change. That was unclear to me. And so I just want to touch on a couple of other formatting things. You were talking about the dates and the location under the education side. I'm noticing some formatting issues under experience. So if we look at the dates here and how they're structured, we have no spaces in between 2016 and 2021. Same thing under additional experience, the 2011 to 2015. But then to your point, if we go back over to the Bachelor's of Art, we've got a gap on both sides. So be consistent in your formatting. Either you're putting a space around that dash in between your dates or you're not. But I've seen on so many resumes how there will be a discrepancy in that formatting. It's just noticing those little details that's going to tighten this up.
Yep. And even really tinier detail, for example, so they've got like this vertical bar separator, which I'm personally not a fan of. They've got a space on either side, but down on this date down here at the bottom, they've actually got two spaces on the right side before the 2011, 2015. And kind of going back to the dates, one thing that confused me a little bit is in the summary at the top, they say they've got over 10 years in international education. When I get to this role, I see that they were there for 5 years, but then they list two jobs that total 9 years, or did they do them at the same time? They did one of them for 4 years, and then like within a year, they started the other role. Like they've always been a humanities teacher, but then they started doing the athletic trainer role as well. Or was this 9 of the 10 years because this only adds up to 5? Like, again, it starts to get a little confusing. I do see additional experience down here at the bottom, which does seem to wrap up more than a decade of experience. But you may want to specify in here that these were like overlapping roles, or like maybe the years that you started each of these roles, so that they can see that you started the humanities teacher in 2016 and then maybe started the athletic trainer in from 2016 to 2020, or from 2017 to 2021, or something like that. Maybe just to help clarify a little bit like when you did those roles, just to kind of clarify that timeline a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, I agree with Catherine's point about like naming the tools on here. If they don't know the tools, then it's not going to be very helpful. Knowing how to use Zoom, I mean, that can be helpful if you're looking for a remote job. But if you're looking for a job sort of on premise with a company, you probably don't need to mention too many remote tools. But if you're looking for a remote job, mentioning that that you use tools like Discord and Google Meet and Zoom and things like that, I think would be a big plus to list. But again, I would make like a separate skills block where you're specifically calling out the technical skills that you have, the different libraries you've used, that sort of thing.
And just to add to that,
Cool. Yeah, go ahead.
there's a huge difference to me in saying, I know how to use Zoom, and assuming you're doing one-on-one conversations, or maybe, in this remote working environment, you're having your staff meetings on Zoom, versus you're hosting speaker series and having thousands of employees log into Zoom and having attendees and panelists and Q&A, and you're operating all of that. That's a very different skill set in my mind, and communicate something very different about your abilities versus I can log into Zoom and have a meeting, with my boss or with my team. So adding that additional context, if you really are advanced in that skill, changes the way the word Zoom or Excel or PowerPoint is received by someone viewing this resume.
Yep. I like that you're adding a GitHub link to your projects. Just keep in mind GitHub has a capital H. So again, just little attention to detail on those things. Personally, if you could deploy that somewhere, like deploy it on Heroku or AWS or something, like get a free instance on AWS or something, and actually put your project online somewhere, and also link to that. I think that can be a really powerful indicator, because then I get to see that not only can you write code, you can write like whole working applications, like this thing actually works, and I can go experience that. For me, when I'm evaluating stuff like that, that makes a much bigger impression than just looking at your code. I mean, I certainly want to go through and look at your code and look at your commit history and see, did you work on it with other people? What were the code reviews like? What was your process on GitHub like? Did you do like branching? Things like that. But I like to experience what people build, me personally. And so if you can get it live somewhere, I think that's actually even more powerful. So, cool. Any last thoughts on this one, Katherine? We'll move on to another one.
Yeah, I'm actually really curious. What is your opinion on having the summary at the top? I've had different opinions be expressed about including a summary and if you should include it and what it's used for. So what do you think?
I would say if you need space on the page, the summary is the first thing to go. Well, the interest and hobbies would be the first thing to go. And then if you still need room, get rid of the summary. Because a resume is really just a list of facts about you that I need to look at really briefly to know, are you qualified for this job? I mean, I tend to skip summary sections most of the time, because if I'm looking at your resume to go, I'm looking for a Python developer that knows Bootstrap and some front-end technologies, I just want to be able to look at this resume in a hurry and see if you've got that, how you've used those skills, maybe click through a couple of projects really quick and go, this is on my yes pile, or this is on my maybe pile, or this is on my no pile, and be able to screen that in a hurry. And so for me, I mean, I've seen summaries like in that little thin sidebar as well, and that actually makes it really hard to read if it's really long. I mean, this summary would probably fill up, a pretty, like probably as much room as their education space if they were to put that summary over in that left sidebar.
Mhm.
So I would say, like, if you really needed space on this side of the page, like if you wanted to put a skills block up at the top, I would probably drop the interests and hobbies, move the education down to the bottom of that sidebar, and put put the summary where your education block is, because it's going to take up about that much room anyway. And so I put the summary here. I would put your education here, because me personally, I'm going to skip all that anyway. The stuff I care about is over here on the right side of the page, which is your skills block and like the work that you've done and the projects that you've worked on. Because for me as a hiring manager, that stuff is more important. But that's not the only person you have to please. And we've talked about that in other streams when we had who was on the show? Spencer was on the show and Aaron was on the show. And we were talking like from an HR perspective, what's important to them as HR representatives when they look at a resume is totally different from what I look for as an engineering manager looking at a resume. And you have to kind of please everybody, which is really hard to do when you got a one-page resume. And so you kind of have to balance that out a little bit for yourselves. And that's why I like to say on these resume reviews, like, don't just listen to me. Don't just listen to Katherine. Get a lot of opinions and figure out how you want to construct it for yourself. Because there's so many people that could potentially look at your resume and they're all going to be looking for something different. They need to be able to find that in a hurry. So what do they need to find and how easily can you make that found on the page? Um, so that would be kind of my take, kind of a long answer, but
Yeah,
I would say if you need space, summary is the first thing to toss on there.
that sounds good. And just one follow-up question to that. What if,
Mm-hmm.
thinking about people who've transitioned in their career or maybe don't have an accurate job title for the work that they're doing, can you use the summary as a place to provide explanation? So let's say in my current role, I'm an apprentice engineer, but I'm also fulfilling PM and TPM roles. And so anyone who sees that is going to be like, why is this happening? This doesn't make sense. Can you utilize the summary as a place to connect some dots that maybe aren't connected by the facts that are included in the rest of the content?
I would say if you need to draw that many lines and dots together, that would probably be your cover letter. The summary should tell me why I should call you for my specific role. And that's more of your present and your future and less about your past. So, like it's good to know you've got 10 years in educational or international education, for example, if you're applying for an ed tech kind of company. If you're not applying for a company that has anything to do at all with education, that doesn't really help me in the summary to know whether I should call you. And so that summary needs to tell me who you are as a developer, why you care about what my company does, like why you care about the things that my company does, and how you're like a great fit for that. Like you need to summarize that in that summary, because if I do read it, I want to know like why are you someone I should call. And so like most times when I talk about resumes and I talk about like make that really really long resume and then trim it down to one page, you're basically taking out everything that is irrelevant to that company for that role. It's really hard to make just a single generic resume that you're just going to send out to everybody, because it's not going to get by as many people as you think, because you're trying to be all things to all people. And that's not really possible with a single page, which is why you have to customize it for the company that you're applying to. And so for something like this, I would say, this would be a pretty decent resume if they were applying to, say, Guild Education in Denver. This would be a pretty decent resume because they've got a lot of education background and they're now a developer. They hire, they're really good about hiring entry-level devs. So this might be an opportunity for them to go apply at Guild, for example. But, if I was looking at this, as part of Stream, for example, like that education background wouldn't help us. I mean, it would help me in my role at Stream. If I was hiring on my team, then I might give this person a call. But for most companies, like this isn't going to be as relevant, and so they're less likely to care that you've written that in your summary. So yeah, I would say that the summary, if you're going to put a summary in there, it needs to be relevant to the role and the company and like why you're applying for that role, why you care about like sort of the direction that they're going. I like to tell people like that summary should really be a summary of your cover letter, where the first paragraph is about you, the second paragraph is about your skills that you're bringing to that job, and the third is like re-emphasizing why you're headed in the same direction as the company and they should call you. You're going to summarize each of those paragraphs into one sentence, and those 3 sentences become your summary on your resume. And so it starts off with like who you are, the skills that you have that are super important, and then like why they should call you because you're super qualified for this particular role. That would be a good way of like bringing that cover letter into the resume and kind of tie those 2 pieces together. That's what I would typically tell people.
Yeah, that's cool. It's fun to learn from you as well, Ian. I'm kind of the opinion to just leave the summary off altogether and have that information be woven into the resume. But I think you bring up some really good points. I'm actually rethinking the way I think about the summary. So thank you.
Well, but again, everybody's different. But for me, I think a lot of people that look at a resume, they're looking at it with the mindset of why should I call this person for this role? And if I'm looking for a specific kind of person, specific technical skills or soft skills or whatever skills, I need to see that in a hurry, and I need to see like, where did you learn it, where have you used it, where have you applied it, or like, how have you developed that over time? Has there been a progression in that skill over time? Like, can I find that easily to go, yes, this person is clearly qualified, I'm going to like add them to my, list of people to call. Because again, when I'm looking at these resumes, I'm looking for a reason to say no. And if I can't find a clear reason why I should call you, then you're not going to get a call. Cool.
Yeah,
I think we might
makes
wrap up
sense.
there. We've been
Cool.
going on for a minute. I think we'll save the other resume for another time. But Katherine, really appreciate your time. Appreciate your perspectives on things, for teaching us all about LinkedIn. Thanks for spending some time with us. Any last closing things? Anything you want to promote? Anything you want to tell folks about? I can drop some links in the chat if you want.
Yeah, for sure. First of all, I just want to say thank you so much for this time. This is a pleasure just to chat about something that is just fun. If you don't have a LinkedIn profile, go ahead and create one. Connect with me on LinkedIn. You can find me under Katherine Lewis, or as I just changed my URL, you can look up Pink Terminal. There's this whole story behind that maybe we can go into another time, but you can also visit my personal website at pinkterminal.io, or look me up on Twitter, again, under Pink Terminal. And the two last things that I would say is anyone who's willing to connect or wants to reach out for more advice, again, just drop me a note that you saw me here on the live stream with Ian, and I'm happy to do resume reviews or help you out with interview prep, look at your LinkedIn profile. All of that is totally fine by me. So happy to help with that. And then I also have a course that's coming up in September that's all about discovering your purpose. So I recently did a lot of work around that, and it's helped me ground my professional pathway. So if anyone is feeling a little bit confused and would like some help with that, it's linked in the feature section of my LinkedIn profile, so you can go and sign up for a course on discovering your purpose. But thank you so much, Ian, for your time.
Yeah, appreciate your time as well, Katherine. Have a good night, and thanks to everybody on the stream. I'll get this up on YouTube in a little bit. Like, subscribe, all that stuff. Hopefully you've watched this far. And thanks for hanging out. Jen Develops, thanks. Good to see you again in chat. And we'll see you on Thursday. Take care.